Victory Hale, a 71-year-old man with a careful tie and a steady walk, arrived at Millfield Gardens and stopped when the security table came into view. On top lay a guest list with his photo clipped to it, and the words in block print, "Do not allow entry under any circumstances." The afternoon was bright. Guests drifted past in suits and dresses, and a string quartet tested a slow scale beyond the hedge. A guard asked for his invitation. Victory showed the family group chat on his phone, names, times, directions, even the rehearsal photo. The guard stayed polite and unmoving. A second guard opened the folder and tapped his picture. Victory felt the noise of the venue thin to a hum. Something was planned here, not a mistake. He stepped aside and called his daughter. Eliza answered on the third ring, breathless, voices calling her name in the background. He told her the guards would not let him in. She said it was a group decision, less stress for everyone, and ended the call before he could say more. He stood still for a count of 5, then walked to his car without raising his voice, past 2 cousins who stared at the pavement and closed the door gently. He did not start the engine. He called his accountant, Mara, and asked for a clear list of what would leave his accounts on Monday. Venue balance, catering balance, quartet remainder, photographer's final fee, transportation, florals, cleanup. She read the items slowly. He watched a laughing couple hand over embossed invitations and disappear through the gate. When Mara finished, he told her there was a change in payment authorization, effective immediately. Final payments were to be placed on hold. If vendors asked why, they should contact the bride's family for instructions. Mara hesitated, then said she understood. Victory ended the call, breathed until the shaking left his hands, and drove home under the linden trees at a careful speed. At his desk, he set water to boil, arranged a notepad, and waited. The first silence felt heavy, then clean. At 4:47 p.m., his phone rang. Eliza again, voice sharp, music behind her cut off mid-song. She asked what he had done. He told her he had updated vendors on payment status and suggested she speak with them directly. She accused him of ruining her day. He said he was honoring her request to reduce stress. The line went dead. He wrote the time in his notebook, noted which vendors might call first, and placed the kettle back on the stove. The mystery was no longer whether he belonged at the gate. The mystery was why a family would plan his erasure at an event he had funded. He decided answers could come later. For now, the record would be simple, the order exact, and the boundary clear. After Eliza ended the call, Victory set his phone on the desk and waited for the next ring, and it came fast. Carol, his ex-wife, spoke without greeting, her voice tight, saying he had humiliated their daughter and made the family look small in front of 300 guests, and he told her the truth as he saw it, that he had simply stopped paying for a party that would not let him in. And when she called him cruel, he ended the call to stop more shouting. A few minutes later, the band leader, Mateo Ruiz, called from the venue. He said staff were whispering about money, and he asked if the band should keep playing to midnight, and Victory asked a plain question first, whether the night felt safe and decent. And Mateo admitted it did not, that the bride was crying and people kept staring toward the gate. And Victory told him to pack up, go home, and send a bill for his inconvenience. He wrote down the time of that call, then answered 2 vendors who phoned with careful, professional voices. He told them the final payments were on hold, and they should contact the bride's family for next steps, and he logged those calls as well. The house fell quiet, except for the kettle and the small tick of the hallway clock, and in that quiet he felt not anger, but a slow question forming. Who had placed his photo on the list? And why had they needed him gone so completely? At 9:17 p.m., a hard knock landed on his front door. Through the peephole, he saw Beatrice Lang, the groom's mother, hair loose now, with 2 figures behind her. He opened the door, but did not invite them in. Beatrice said he had ruined the wedding and demanded he fix what he had broken. Victory answered that he had not been allowed to set foot on the grounds and could not break what he was barred from touching. She said he always made everything about himself. He asked her when he had last set any condition on help, then answered for her, never, and the porch went quiet. Miranda, the groom's sister, spoke softly and said Eliza only wanted no drama, and Victory asked what drama he would have caused, walking a daughter down an aisle, and Miranda had no reply. Beatrice tried again and said money does not buy control, and Victory agreed, then added that respect is not purchased either. It is given, and it had not been given at the gate. He said he would not argue on the porch at night, and he began to close the door, and Miranda asked him to wait. But he told her the family had already spoken at the venue table when they placed his picture under the order to keep him out. He closed the door, locked it, and wrote the time of the visit in his notebook, the names present, and one line that summed up the night: refusing to fund my own absence. By morning, Victory checked his phone and saw dozens of missed calls. But it was a Facebook notification that fixed the day's direction. Eliza had posted at 7:47 a.m. that her father had sabotaged her wedding because he could not handle not being the center of attention. And comments stacked fast, some calling him toxic, others asking why a man who paid for everything would be banned at the gate. And he read all of it once, then set the phone down and made coffee so his hands would stop shaking. After breakfast, a local blog by Julia Monroe repeated Eliza's story with the headline, "When Love Comes with Strings," and strangers argued under it, and the noise made a steady pressure in his chest. But he stayed with a simple plan. Write nothing yet, record what happens, wait for facts. At 11:15 a.m., Channel 9 called and asked for an interview, and Victory declined, saying he would send documents later. At noon, he rang his attorney, Daniel Brooks, and asked him to search for recent loan applications, cosign requests, and any paperwork with his name on it. And Daniel said he would start with the credit bureaus and public filings. At 2:10 p.m., Victory called Mateo Ruiz to thank him for leaving without trouble and to ask what he had observed the past month. And Mateo said the planning meetings showed Victory as payer, while all final decisions were signed by Eliza and Damon. And on the night itself, several relatives told vendors that Victory had threatened everyone for weeks, which did not match the paperwork Mateo had seen. At 5:32 p.m., a private number flashed, and it was Helen, Carol's sister, speaking in a careful whisper, saying she had sat at Carol's kitchen table the Tuesday before the wedding, while Eliza, Damon, Beatrice, and Richard went over a pre-approval for Damon's consulting business. And the bank needed a guarantor with strong assets. And Beatrice called it good psychology to freeze Victory out so he would come back apologizing and sign after the ceremony. And if he did not break quickly, they would push for a capacity check and a limited power of attorney to protect Eliza's future. Victory wrote every word in his notebook and asked Helen why she was telling him now. And she said because the blacklist at the gate was not about peace, it was about control, and she could not watch it go further. After the call, he walked to the window and stood still, the street quiet under a pale sky, and the mystery that had started at the clipboard became sharper. Someone had needed him unseen and compliant at the same time, and the photo at the gate was not a boundary, it was a lever. He opened a clean document on his computer, labeled it Record, and began laying out dates, transfers, invoices, and text threads in order, deciding that when he finally spoke, he would speak once with proof, and he would keep his boundary clear. Victory spent the early evening turning notes into an open letter, keeping his language calm and his order exact. He listed dates, amounts, and actions in simple rows so any reader could follow, starting with the $43,000 wire to Millfield Gardens and continuing through payments to Aria Strings, the photographer, transportation, florals, and the many small transfers to Eliza and Damon over 3 years for rent gaps, student loans, and car repairs. Then he attached screenshots of messages where Eliza asked for help and Damon admitted being short, and he saved the whole packet as a single PDF with labeled exhibits. At 6:55 p.m., he posted the letter on his page, emailed it to Channel 9 and to Julia Monroe, and placed a copy in a shared drive link so producers could verify the files. The replies arrived quickly. The station booked him for the 6th segment the next day if he would bring originals. He agreed on 2 conditions: that the reporter read his letter first and that the documents be shown on camera. The next afternoon, he arrived at the studio with a flat folder, his ledger notebook, and clear sleeves for each item. The producer clipped a microphone to his lapel, guided him to a chair under soft lights, and introduced the reporter, Anika Shah, who had a printout of his letter with notes in the margins. On air, he placed the bank transfer to Millfield Gardens at the edge of the table, then the quartet invoice, then the photographer's deposit receipt. And he stated that all vendor decisions were signed by the couple while he only paid. Annika compared each paper to a copy. Then she read from a text where Eliza asked for help with the venue deposit, and from another where Damon requested the band balance, and she asked if he had ever tied payments to demands, and he answered that he had not, and that his line was only drawn after he saw his own photo at the gate. The segment cut to a wide shot of the stack of documents, then closed. Outside the station, he put the originals back into their sleeves and took a slow walk home. Emails were already waiting. 2 vendors wrote to confirm they had removed his name from contacts at the couple's request weeks before the wedding. A third apologized for the confusion and asked where to send an updated invoice for packing out early. He approved that payment at once and marked it in his ledger, noting he had no dispute with workers who refused to stand in the middle of a conflict. He called Daniel Brooks to share the studio time and asked again for any proof that the loan plan and the talk of competency had moved beyond a kitchen table idea. Daniel said he was still pulling records, and Victory wrote that update in his notebook. The mystery was smaller now, but not closed. The blacklist proved intent, the loan files would prove motive, and he would wait for both. He made tea, filed the folder in a locked drawer, and set an alarm to check the evening news cycle once more before bed. At 8:32 p.m., the doorbell rang 3 times in a row, and when Victory looked through the peephole, he saw Eliza on the step with Damon beside her, and just behind them, Beatrice, Carol, and Richard, all of them pale under the porch light. He opened the door but stood in the frame so no one mistook the gesture as an invitation inside. And Eliza spoke first, voice hoarse, saying they needed to talk and that they could fix everything if he would help. And Victory asked what needed fixing, the posts or the money or the story that had been told about him, then waited while she glanced at Damon and lost her place. Damon stepped forward and said they were sorry for how the gate looked, but the day had been chaotic and feelings were raw. And Victory asked a narrow question. Who placed his photograph on the security folder? And Damon admitted he printed it from a barbecue picture and handed it to the venue manager after Beatrice suggested they avoid surprises. And Beatrice said the word meant only peace, not cruelty. Victory asked Eliza who decided to approach him about the business loan after the ceremony, when the mood was soft and friendly. And Eliza said they had planned to talk when everyone was calm because the bank wanted a guarantor, and she knew her father cared about her future. And she added that she had been afraid he would say no if she asked weeks earlier, so they had waited, and the sentence hung between them like a drawn line. Carol told Victory to stop making a scene and to think of his grandchild one day, and he did not raise his voice. He said a scene had been made at Millfield Gardens when his face was set under orders not to enter, and that he was now asking for plain facts, not apologies. He asked if there had been talk of a capacity check and a power of attorney, and Richard looked down at his shoes while Beatrice said someone had mentioned those as last resort protections, and she called it bad wording, nothing more. Victory nodded once, then explained that he had no argument with safety or planning, but that the sequence mattered. First the erasure, then the ask. He said love without respect was leverage, and he would not sign under leverage again. Damon asked what Victory wanted to end the crisis, whether it was repayment or a public statement, and Victory said he wanted nothing from them for the first time in 3 years, and that nothing was the point. He would not trade his boundary for posts or praise. Eliza cried and said they were family, and Victory answered that family did not blacklist each other, did not plan signatures for when a man was softened by shame, did not hold papers in a kitchen and call it psychology. He told them he would pay the working people who had been decent and leave the rest to contracts and records, and he thanked them for giving straight answers at last. Then he stepped back, said good night, and closed the door, and in the quiet that followed, he wrote the time, the names, and the admissions in his notebook, noting that motive had finally traveled out of rumor and into speech. The house stayed quiet after the door closed, and Victory wrote the time and the short list of admissions, then slept for a few hours and woke before sunrise to an email from Daniel Brooks. The subject line read, "Findings so far," and inside were PDFs of a loan pre-approval naming Damon as borrower, drafts of guarantor language listing V. Hale in a highlighted field, and an email thread between Beatrice and the couple that used simple bullets: sequence, boundary, forgiveness ask, and, as a last line, POA if necessary if he resists, which confirmed what Helen had warned. Victory saved each file into his case folder, added them to the exhibit index, and sent a short note back to Daniel asking for preservation letters to the venue, florist, photographer, and band so no one could claim records had gone missing. By mid-morning, 2 vendors wrote to say they were sorry for the confusion and that they had removed his name from their contacts only after the couple insisted. He replied that he would promptly pay any reasonable costs for early packout and that all other balances should follow the signed contracts with the bride's family. Channel 9 requested a follow-up segment. He agreed if they would show the new documents on screen, and that evening the station ran a side-by-side. Eliza's earlier claims and the invoices, texts, and emails now in public view. Online, the noise changed cadence. Some comments stayed harsh, but others asked new, practical questions about the blacklist and the guarantor timing. And Julia Monroe posted a careful update saying documentation suggested a different story than the first headline. Victory used the same calm steps he had used all week. Log the calls, answer only what needed facts, and keep the boundary. On Thursday, a plain envelope arrived with no return address and 4 photocopied pages, meeting notes in Beatrice's hand that matched Daniel's email thread, and a small sticky note with 3 words. "I'm sorry, H." He filed the copies behind the originals and did not reach for the phone. He approved Mateo's invoice for the band's early departure and thanked him for protecting his players. He sent a short payment to the vendor, who packed equipment safely when the reception fell apart. That night, he wrote 1 page in his notebook about what would come next. No public fights, no more interviews unless there were new facts, and no private deals to fix reputations. On Friday morning, Eliza left a voicemail saying she needed time and that she would not speak on television again. He saved it without reply. Daniel called an hour later and said the bank had withdrawn the loan pre-approval after the news cycle. Victory said he understood and asked Daniel to close the file unless someone filed suit. At dusk, he stood at the window and watched the street grow still. The mystery was not complicated anymore. Someone had needed him silent and compliant, and when he refused, the story they tried to build could not hold. He made tea, checked the lock on the drawer where the documents rested, and wrote 1 line to end the record. He would not finance his own erasure. Not now. Not again.